While Joe Rogan had Ric Flair on his podcast this week and was able to talk a lot about Ric Flair's career, some of which I've already covered in a previous clip. You can check that out of Ric Flair on the Joe Rogan podcast. But while Rick was there, they had the chance to talk a lot about wrestling in general and how the world of professional wrestling can kind of interacts with Joe's world of MMA and the UFC, and how those worlds do have a little bit of crossover and do have some people that have actually dabbled in both. Here's a real big montage. This is a bigger clip than I normally do, but I really wanted this to kind of be the source because Rogan's podcast is fucking 3 hours long, right? So I really wanted to kind of just make this a nice little archive of Joe Rogan talking kind of in depth about all the different pro wrestlers who have crossed over into the world of MMA, or the MMA fighters that have crossed over into the world of WWE, professional wrestling. Check out these clips, and then I'll catch you on the other side.
Right.
I just saw Kenny last month. I love Ken Shamrock.
Well, he was one of the first guys to be a legit fighter that went over to WWE.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was the first, legit guy to make it over there. You know, that was, in the middle of kind of in his prime, right? I mean,
he was a tough guy, though, right?
Yeah. He was fucking jacked, too.
Yeah.
I mean, Ken Shamrock in his day was a bad man.
Well, you would say he was, right?
Oh, yeah.
I thought so, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was a real pioneer. The crossover between MMA and UFC, or UFC rather, and pro wrestling is there's a lot of guys I know that entertained it. Did you ever think that, when you were a young man, if that was around, that you would have done it?
No, I never considered it. I don't know. I was already so wrapped up in wrestling, I didn't think about it. But I've always had a lot of respect for the people that do.
Only a few guys have ventured. CM Punk was the one who took the most chances, right? Because he didn't really have a martial arts background.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah.
That was bad for everybody.
I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched him hit the pads, and I'm like, there's no way.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way. There's nothing there.
Yeah, there is no, I'm going to do this with all my heart.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go in there.
I never saw him. He got killed, right?
He got fucked up a couple of times.
Oh,
he fought this kid, Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall ran over him like a freight train. And then he fought, I think, Mike Jackson. Mike Jackson just kind of pieced him up, but didn't stop him. But he just wasn't good enough. It's just so hard to do that in your 30s, to learn how to do MMA in your 30s when you don't really. I mean, he had a background. You gotta pee. Yeah. He had a background. He's gonna take a leak. Yeah. He had a background in pro wrestling, but he didn't really have a background in martial arts. So, I mean, I admire the fact that he was willing to take the challenge.
That's what I admire too.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta have halfway crazy to do that anyway.
Yes, for sure. He did do it the right way. He went to Rufus Sport, which is like an elite, top quality MMA gym. He trained with world class guys. It just takes so long to acquire those skills, and if in certain skills with certain body types, if you don't learn how to strike when you're really young, it's very it's depending upon the person. Some people could pick it up in their 30s. But with a lot of guys, if they don't learn how to strike when they're young, they just don't have that speed and ability. They just.
What do you think would have happened if Brock would have started right away?
He would have been a world elite, greatest of all time.
Yeah.
If someone taught Brock Muay Thai and submission moves when he was a kid, and he went into MMA with his kind of physicality, he would have dominated.
Yeah,
he would have dominated.
Yeah. What did you think of Jon Jones? He's bad.
He's a bad man.
Yeah,
John's a bad man.
Think Brock could get in there with him?
That would have been very interesting.
Yeah,
because Brock was so fucking big, and Brock's wrestling was so good.
Yeah,
and when that guy shot a power double, it was like getting hit by a bus.
Yeah,
he was so big.
Yeah.
It would be interesting, but Cain Velasquez beat Brock up, a couple of times.
Yeah,
and I think John is at least at that level. Why didn't he stick with pro wrestling? Do you know, Tony? What happened with Cain Velasquez?
He didn't make the progress that they thought he would. He's a real nice guy.
Yeah, they just messed that whole thing up tremendously. It was crazy. They tried to make a fake actual fight.
Yeah,
and it was just a nightmare, and it just didn't.
Yeah, they put on MMA gloves, right?
Yeah, they tried to make it like this is the guy that beat Brock in the UFC, so he's going to come here and really put a working on him. But Brock's such a freak athlete like so well rounded. Even though Cain's a great fighter, it's just you have to have pop. You have to be there. Yeah, you have to be larger than life.
You have to entertain.
Yes.
And he was more of like just a stoic fighter.
Yeah, like they were doing low leg kicks, which is, again, like, it's just, it ain't flying in the WWE.
Right.
It's boring.
But you know that Cain does like crazy lucha libre pro wrestling too, where he jumps up in the air and scissors someone's legs and flips over. He can do all that shit too.
Rey Mysterio taught him all that shit.
Oh, that's who taught him.
Yeah, he and Rey are best friends.
But really, when you're thinking, I mean, other than Ken Shamrock going from MMA to WWE, very few guys other than Brock, and who else was it? Besides Brock and CM Punk. Is there anybody else who did it? Bobby Lashley.
Bobby Lashley.
Bobby Lashley fought a bunch of legit MMA fights.
Ronda
went back.
Oh, huge.
She went the other way, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She went over there.
Yeah, going from pro wrestling to
Batista did.
to UFC.
Batista had a real
Really?
MMA fight. Yep.
Did he?
Yeah, he won. Yeah. See if you can find that. I mean, it wasn't the most impressive fight, but he had a real fight.
Yeah.
A real legit MMA fight.
Yeah, Dave's a great guy.
I think it's great for people that, are done getting beat up in the UFC to get to have a career afterwards. Ronda and Charlotte Flair's rivalry was insane.
Yeah,
I mean,
What about Matt Riddle? Matt
Yeah.
Riddle's another guy.
Yeah.
Went over from MMA into WWE.
And thriving.
He's thriving.
Yeah.
And, he kind of got fucked over in MMA. He tested positive for weed. And that's how he got kicked out of the UFC, which now is Dan Severn, of course.
Oh,
Dan
yeah.
Severn.
Yeah.
That's right. And Dan Severn went over and,
Yeah.
well, Dan Severn did a lot of, like, pro wrestling matches before and after he did MMA.
Yeah.
That's right. Forgot about Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got complete control.
Yeah,
that's a guy who's
correct.
done that probably 150,000 fucking times.
Yeah.
Like, look how
And safe.
effortlessly he does
Yeah,
it.
and
Safe.
Kurt has unbelievable strength.
Yeah, obviously. Guy's a gorilla.
yeah.
Yeah.
I asked Dana one time what he thought Kurt would have done. He said Kurt would have been phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Who's going to stop that guy from taking him down?
Yeah.
In
Nobody. But
MMA.
So quick.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear Joe's perspective, especially because I didn't really think that Joe had much respect for professional wrestling. He always kind of dunks on it when he gets the chance to. And he's very much one of those meathead types that are very much of the perspective of it's a fake pro wrestling bullshit. You know what I mean? Where his criticism of pro wrestling is that pro wrestling is fake. Like anybody fucking still thinks it's real or cares that it's fake anymore, But there's a lot of the people out there, especially the older generation, which Rogan comes from, that's kind of still of that opinion of, oh, wrestling's fake. You know what I mean? Or people are stupid that think wrestling is real. You know what I mean? Like, so Rogan's very much that person, but he seemed to have a lot of fucking respect for what wrestlers do, what wrestlers go through, not just in these clips, but in different conversations with Ric Flair on this episode. All the stories about like Ric's, taking bumps and stuff after the plane crash and just how many nights a week they wrestle and that sort of thing. Like Joe really does seem to have a decent understanding of what pro wrestling is and has a respect for it. He might not like it and it might still be that fake wrestling bullshit to him, but he very much has a solid understanding of it now. And maybe it's come over time from interviewing wrestlers and hearing their different stories and learning more about it. He also said that he's friends with Josh Barnett, who's, very much involved in pro wrestling as well, both from the world of pro wrestling and MMA. There's been lots of people, besides everybody named in those clips. There's Shayna Baszler, Marina Shafir, even though she kind of sucks, Josh Barnett, Chael Sonnen apparently had talked to WWE at one point. So it's happened, and I'm probably forgetting some still. It's happened quite a bit. Let's not forget Bart Gunn, right? Or Butterbean or Floyd Mayweather jumping over. It doesn't even have to be MMA. Look at the boxers who have jumped over. It's really an extensive history of fighters mixing with pro wrestling and pro wrestling mixing with fighting, even over in Japan. as Joe kind of said towards the end there, it's a whole nother thing over there, right? The pancrase, kind of worked shoot pro wrestling shit over there. Was essentially kind of like MMA, but it was worked. So they would go hard, but they would have a predetermined finish, essentially. It's a wild history. It's fun to hear Joe's thoughts on that and to really look back at some of the big top stars that have been able to cross over and do their thing from a CM Punk. And look, everybody buries CM Punk for his time jumping over to the UFC and getting fucking smoked and squashed, which he did, undeniable. But, like Joe kind of gave him his props too. Like, at least he did it right, and at least he had the balls to do it. And Ric Flair said the same. Nobody really dunked on Punk here other than just stating straight facts that he had no chance. He wasn't going to be able to do it. But he put over Batista, Bobby Lashley, Brock Lesnar, he said could have been an all-timer, which he kind of, at least in a heavyweight world, is. Maybe not in win-loss records or ability, but certainly in star power. He's a UFC, I don't know if he is in the Hall of Fame, but he certainly should be a future UFC Hall of Famer. He did incredible business for UFC and had a lot of big main event, headline, top draw fights. And he won a championship there. So is what it fucking is, man. He's an elite pro MMA fighter. Lots of people, Ronda Rousey, look at the people who have jumped the other way, Ronda Rousey and Matt Riddle. I was thinking Matt Riddle while they were talking about this, and then when Joe chimed in, Matt Riddle, and then he knew enough about Matt Riddle to say that he's excelling, that he is flourishing in the fucking WWE, that he's doing great over there. And of course, Tony Hinchcliffe was along. For those of you who are wondering who's this other nerdy Femi guy who keeps chiming in, that is Tony Hinchcliffe. He's a comedian. He has a great podcast called Kill Tony. If you haven't heard that, I highly recommend that shit. If you're into stand-up comedy, it's like an open mic night where just people from the crowd or whatever get a minute on stage, and then he interviews them in like a podcast format after. It's great shit, and he's a huge wrestling nerd. He knows his shit. Not like we know our shit, right? He's still a little cringy. He's still like one of those people who thinks he knows, but he doesn't know everything. So you kind of cringe when he says some stuff, but he knows a lot, like a lot. He's said enough and talked enough about wrestling where he has my respect. So, if you're wondering who that weird guy is chiming in, he knows his shit enough to be part of the conversation for sure. And he's cool. So great little interview, great podcast, great interview with Ric Flair. It was very fun. I love when worlds cross over. I like Joe's podcast. I don't listen a lot just because it's so goddamn long, and because, multiple times a week, it's impossible to keep up with. And sometimes it gets really deep and into the weeds. And, if his podcast was only an hour and a half, I could probably get through it a lot better. But that's just me. Some people maybe listen to it in pieces or whatever, but this one was a fun listen. It was fun to hear Ric Flair on there, and really, I just appreciate Joe, the way Joe kind of talked about how pro wrestling and MMA can kind of cross over, and really did kind of show his base knowledge and respect of what pro wrestling is. So much love to that. Go listen to this episode. I can't link it in the description because it is a Spotify exclusive. Maybe I can find a Spotify link or something. I don't fucking know. But you know how to find Joe Rogan's podcast. Jesus Christ, it's only the biggest podcast in the world, right?
Oh yeah, thanks for checking out the video. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like it if you liked it. Yeah. You can check out full episodes each and every Sunday right here on the channel. Ooh yeah, dig it!